Have any of you guys heard of the film Penelope? If not, I can sum it up as a strange, whimsical story set in the modern day, with a lot of fairy tale tropes such as riddle-like spells. This was a comfort movie for me growing up. I must have watched it at least a dozen times. It stars Christina Ricci as the titular character, Penelope, and I was familiar with her due to my family's obsession with the Addams Family films from the early 90s. Penelope explores family expectations, societal pressure, and what it means to be normal. Penelope goes on a journey around breaking a family curse on the film's surface, but if you dig deeper, it's about her discovering who she truly is. It at least tries to address the question of, what does it really mean to accept yourself when the world tells you that you shouldn't? But is Penelope as good as I remember? Let's find out. Without further ado, on with the review.
Polos is life, 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 sleep all night and then Polos is life.
So, following some production logos, the film begins with Penelope describing her family history to us. She was born into the upper-class Wilhern family, who harbour a rather dark secret that began when one of her ancestors, Ralph, had an affair with a servant girl, Clara. While he originally planned to marry Clara, his family didn't take this prospect seriously. So, in typical fashion for the era, he married someone of similar social status. If you know anything about an Inspector Calls, you know this kind of story can't end well for anyone involved, and Clara game ends when she hears the news. Clara's mother turned out to be the town witch, typical mezzo-soprano and contralto style dynamic here, and curses the next Wilhern daughter to be born with the face of a pig.
And only when one of your own kind claims this daughter as their own, till death do they part, will the curse be broken.
Funnily enough, the next 5 Wilhern children are all sons, until finally Ella and Leonard Wilhern are blessed with a girl. As you might guess, however, this baby is actually not a Wilhern, meaning that the real next Wilhern girl turns out to be Penelope. I really like the way the backstory is explained here. It doesn't take too long, and we even get some nice visuals through an animation of a literal family tree. We then see a 25-year-old Penelope talking to a potential love interest, Edward Humphrey Vanderman III. What a name! Who is played by Simon Woods, who you may recognise as Mr. Bingley in the 2005 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. They're talking via a two-way mirror, which I'm guessing is so any suitor has the chance to fall for Penelope's personality before seeing her face. It's a bit on the manipulative side, but, you know, desperate times and all that. Edward tells Penelope that if he must be more than his good name and good looks, she must be more than her cursed name and cursed looks.
What?
While Penelope's family approve, I don't. That's pretty backhanded if you ask me. Unsurprisingly, he doesn't really take seeing her face too well. This guy will show up again later, and I mean, just that line about appearances and stuff says all you need to know about this guy and his priorities. Very different kind of guy to Bingley. Penelope's mum, Jessica, played by Catherine O'Hara, immediately scolds her for scaring Edward off. There's then this wonderfully overdramatic shot where we see Penelope's face on screen for the first time, and there has been some build-up. We don't even see her face when she's shown as a baby. We also get this very telling line from Jessica which just sort of encompasses the film's theme of superficiality and appearances, and why Penelope has such a hard time until the conclusion.
You're somebody else inside just waiting to come out.
Furthermore, we also learn that when Penelope was an infant, Jessica intended to have her nose surgically removed, but this was deemed far too dangerous. Penelope does elaborate that she knows her mother means well, despite her questionable methods, and in this flashback we're introduced to Lemon, a tabloid photographer played by Peter Dinklage. While trying to stop Penelope from being photographed, Jessica beats Lemon, blinding him in one eye. Jessica then goes full overprotection mode and fakes Penelope's death, keeping her hidden from the outside world. This new protection scheme also includes forbidding Penelope's father, Franklin, played by Richard E. Grant, from eating bacon, and the new butler, Jake, played by Michael Feast, from playing This Little Piggy Went to Market with baby Penelope. In a genuinely upsetting scene, Penelope isn't even allowed to be seen by other children, which I'm sure must have had some impact on her development. This isolation changes when on her 18th birthday, Jessica hires a matchmaker named Wanda to find a blue-blooded suitor for Penelope. This whole situation is just yikes. Unfortunately, Jake can't catch up with Edward in time to get him to sign an NDA. Edward does try to file a police report about the whole affair, but no one really takes him seriously, except for Lemon. See, no one believed Lemon's story about Jessica and Penelope back in the day, and now he's desperate to clear his name. They hire a broke blue blood named Max Campion, played by fetus James McAvoy, to pose as a new suitor in return for a sum of money, planting a camera in his jacket. Today, Penelope has requested that all of the possible suitors gather together in the mirror room at the same time, before bursting into their horror. However, Max was busy fixing his camera behind the sofa, and didn't see her. She catches him stealing a book, and he admits this after some pressure, so she points out a more expensive book for him to take and sell instead. Max agrees to return the next day, and they play a silly game where Penelope guesses which instrument he plays, which turns out to be fruitless, although Penelope does reveal that she wants to be a horticulturalist. He offers to take her to the pub, but she turns him down. He then knocks on the mirror and tells her to come out, and it's unclear whether he's doing this just to get the photograph because he's actually starting to like her, or both. I wonder if even the character knows. Some time passes, and Penelope comes to the conclusion that Max plays the piano. Honestly, that would be my first guess. Even if it's not someone's main instrument anymore, loads of people start out on the piano. He starts playing really off-key, and Penelope tries to correct him, eventually appearing behind him. Her appearance does make him jump, and Max seems surprised, but not disgusted or frightened. When he tries to touch Penelope's nose, the camera clicks, which causes him to turn away, but she interprets all of this as another rejection. Max goes outside and smashes Lemon's camera on the ground, but Jessica and Wanda follow him out, and Jessica immediately recognizes Lemon. Despite all of this, Penelope still asks Max to marry her, and when he asks what she'd do if the curse isn't broken, she promises to end her life. This isn't the answer Max wants to hear, but he still refuses to marry her. It might seem a bit random on a first watch, but it makes a lot more sense by the end of the film. Max is then seen practicing the piano and continuing to gamble, while Franklin tries to convince Jessica to stop with all the matchmaking. Penelope sneaks out of the house, disguising her face with a scarf, and Lemon and Edward immediately begin their hunt to take a photo of her. Penelope checks into a hotel, and Edward describes a hideous version of her to a sketch artist. This contrast between this and Penelope's real face highlights just how ridiculous Edward's interpretation of her is. The drawing ends up in the paper, and Jessica and Franklin manage to trace Penelope to the hotel with the help of a detective, since Penelope used Jessica's card to pay for it. Penelope does escape, and she sells her own photo to Lemon. Seeing for himself that this monstrous version of Penelope doesn't really exist fills Lemon with guilt, and he tries, in vain, to dissuade Edward from continuing with their smear campaign. Instead, Edward makes sure that her photograph is all over the front page of every tabloid. Finding the pub that Max mentioned, Penelope tries her first beer on tap, and Lemon tells Max that Penelope is now out in the real world. Soon drunk, Penelope meets a delivery girl named Annie, played by Reese Witherspoon, aka Elle Woods. Sometime later, Penelope's parents spot her in the street, and she flees into the pub, collapsing once she gets inside. Annie removes her scarf to help her breathe more easily, but of course, this exposes her as Penelope. Penelope then wakes up in hospital, greeted by numerous reporters and photographers, and she becomes a local celebrity overnight. The press soon make their way to the Vanderman household and question Edward about his desire to file assault charges against Penelope.
That woman, that thing, belongs in a cage.
What?
What the hell we gonna do now?
I love how confidently he says it too. What a muppet. Edward's father is horrified by this and doesn't want Edward's public disdain for Penelope to affect company sales, so he orders Edward to make amends with her. With some pressure from Jessica, Penelope agrees to marry Edward, and meanwhile, Lemon hears that Max Campion is now in prison for armed robbery. Now, before you think this movie has taken a really dark turn, it turns out the actual Max Campion is this guy played by Nick Frost, and James McAvoy's character is just some broke guy called Johnny Martin. There have been several hints at this, like Max and Johnny are always being seen at the same table while gambling, and when Lemon first approaches Johnny, he tells him this.
You got the wrong guy.
The fake Max, or Johnny, confronts Edward during the new couple's engagement party, but backs down when Edward says the only person he'll hurt is Penelope. At the wedding, Lemon tells Jessica and Wanda about the whole scheme, but Jessica decides to keep this from Penelope in the hopes that the curse will still be lifted through the marriage. However, during the exchange of vows, Penelope decides she can't go through with it. She locks herself in her room and tells her mother, who's outside, that she doesn't feel the need to change and that she likes herself just the way she is. Ironically, this lifts the curse, and when she gets up, her pig-like features are gone. Later on, Jessica has the audacity to suggest that Penelope should get a nose job to make her nose more upturned.
What?
So Penelope quite understandably packs up and leaves. At the same time, Jake quits and renders Jessica mute for an indefinite period of time, in reality being the witch that originally cursed the family. Penelope becomes a horticultural teacher at a primary school, and Wanda eventually tells her the truth about Johnny. At a Halloween party, Penelope meets Johnny while disguised in a mask of her own face. She reveals that she was able to free herself from her own curse, and it cuts to the couple recounting the story to Penelope's class. So, what did I think of Penelope overall? I enjoyed it, although I thought it was rather cheesy. I also understood the main themes and certain character moments better compared to when I watched it as a child. One of the more obvious themes in the film is appearances, namely Penelope's appearance, but also those of the people around her. Given that Jessica is obsessed with keeping up appearances and correcting Penelope's, Penelope grows to resent her face as it's limited her from doing the things that she wants to do, and seems to bring her mother a lot of shame and stress. On top of that, every single possible suitor of hers runs from the sight of her, stopping her from achieving what she thinks is her only chance of being set free. Ironically, this cast and subsequent monstrous depictions of her don't reflect her personality at all. She's sympathetically quite sheltered and idealistic, which becomes very evident when she runs away. I mean, the poor thing assumes a pair of joggers are trying to chase her. Also, she just isn't that hideous. The pig features are unfortunate, but she just looks kind of goofy. The other character that most obviously keeps up appearances is Johnny. He seems like a much more selfish and avaricious person when you think he's Max Campion, but his choices make way more sense upon a second watch, and you know he's just some struggling musician who means well. One line that stuck out to me occurred during a scene where he gets annoyed at Edward when he insults Penelope.
I know you're kind. Spoiled, rotten mama's boy with nothing. Oh my God!
Under the assumption that he's Max Campion, you'd assume he meant that said, spoiled rotten little mama's boys are people he grew up around, or himself, but the meaning does change coming from someone who's never been incredibly wealthy. Another major theme in Penelope is acceptance and how Penelope's desperation to be accepted by other people has actually been holding her back. Penelope notes that Jessica means well, but her actions have the opposite effect of what she intends. She tries to free Penelope by finding a husband, but in doing so, she reinforces the curse's power and Penelope's sense of being hideous and unlovable, when the true resolution comes from Penelope's sense of self. Jessica even comes to this conclusion after the curse has been lifted.
I could have broken the curse years ago if I'd just done my job as your mother and loved you as my own.
I actually think Penelope's ability to accept herself may have been catalyzed from disobeying her mother and experiencing the real world, even from selling her own photos, as the public, while fickle in viewing her as a commodity, really didn't have as negative of a reaction to her as assumed. On top of this, Jessica interpreted the curse to be referring to class, one of her own kind, when a lot of the suitors Penelope was faced with were likely very sheltered themselves and therefore didn't have the emotional means to empathize with anything they were unfamiliar with. I mean, curses are like riddles. The first mistake is to interpret them literally. While the twist and ending are really cheesy, one thing I really appreciate about this film is that they choose to subvert the love will save you trope instead of copping out. It sets up the expectation that someone else's acceptance, this being an unexpected suitor, will break the curse, but it's Penelope's self-acceptance that does so instead. Penelope features a lot of fairy tale conventions like a family curse centering around love and transformations. Traditionally, the princess is rescued by another party, and while this isn't inherently a bad thing, the fact that Penelope is able to break the curse herself is refreshing. However, I will say that the pacing throughout the film is a bit odd, and feels quite rushed during the last 20 minutes or so. One thing that has always puzzled me though is the absence of a clear setting for the story. The cast includes British and American actors, and filming took place in London, Surrey, and Buckinghamshire, but the exact location of the story isn't stated. It's probably purposefully left ambiguous to fit with the fairy tale motif. To wrap up, Penelope might be a bit cheesy and uneven at times, but it's an interesting film with an original premise. I would recommend it to anyone who wants to watch something whimsical and sappy with a bit of a twist here and there. Well, that's all for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.
The blue and green ones are my favorite kind, but I'll eat the colored ones from time to time, 'cause Polos is life, 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 Polos is life. Sleep all night